Hey, I'm Kayla Stanley. I'm going to walk you through the exact $1 million tech sales playbook, exactly how I went from $60,000 a year to earning over $500,000 in tech sales last year. I've done this for myself and I've done this for many clients before. I walk you through really where tech sales started to where it is now in the AI boom, how to think about evaluating the tech sales companies, the exact salary progression you can expect, and the sort of roles to look out for when you're landing into a tech sales role. Let's get into it. What's important to understand is what is tech sales, but if we jump straight to the AI boom, it's important to understand where it all happened and started. So I think what's important is in 1940s is to understand this is when the first chip was created. And this is obviously very foundational to everything that's happened within the tech wave today. And in 1990s, for a very fun fact for you all, we had 5 billion people in the world at that point in time, and 1% of people were online. That is super interesting to me. In 2000s, we had the internet happen and the dot-com boom, and we also had the social media era. All right, so since the 2000s to 2020, we've obviously seen a lot of technology come in place. There's software, there's hardware, and all this is happening as well. And a lot of companies are adopting this very rapidly, even going from like on-prem solutions to the cloud. And now in 2020s, we have 8 billion people in the world, and we now have 70% of people online. So in roughly around 30 years, we've gone from 1% of people online to now 70%, and we're much closer to 100% of people online today. And we are now in 2026, which is the AI boom. It's really hard to fathom everything going around us, but things are changing very rapidly and how we are all having to work. And I strongly believe AI is not going to be taking sales roles, and this is consistently showcased in things where Atlassian and Cloudflare are letting go of people, but continuously keeping people that are generating revenue. Now, when you think about everything that's happening in the world of technology today, in only of Q1 of 2026, so of January, February, March, we had $300 billion that was invested into technology. Okay, so a lot of these VC firms are investing money into products and solutions that they think is going to make them lots of money, but also change the world as well. And now 80% of that $300 billion was invested into AI companies alone. Okay, so that is huge. Now, what the stats are saying and things of predictions is that 2.4 million sales roles in tech are going to be created by 2030. So we have 2.4 million roles by 2030. And I think that's actually only going to change and increase as well. But the ways we work and how we engage and enable with the end customers is going to be rapidly different, because obviously AI is going to take a lot of the administration tasks at the front end of this. However, the human-to-human experience is not going to change. Something where a chief information officer or a chief HR officer, where they're having to sign off $1 million, $100 million deals, they're going to want to sit across from someone that is really helping them problem solve something in their company. And that's really where you come into it to be able to solve that problem for them. And I can tell you now, when you get into enterprise B2B selling, a lot of the software that's implemented inside these large organizations is not something where you download an app on your phone. It can be very complex in these large S&P 500 companies, and therefore it can take weeks or months to accomplish that thing. Now, with all these roles being created, so let's say there's 2.4 million new roles being created in the tech sales landscape, what's very fundamental to understanding is the type of roles inside the tech sales organization. Now, what we can see in the headlines, a lot of the revenue generating roles are not going away. And you can think about those as being SDRs, BDRs. You can think about those being AEs and account managers you could put there. Now, there's so many different roles within inside tech. You have CSM, so customer success managers, you have the implementation team, and you have all these different stakeholders. And if you're in a very large organization, say a Salesforce or a ServiceNow, you almost have the core account executive, but you have specialist account executives that own a specific product. Because inside these large platform organizations, you can have 100 different SKUs, and so people become specialists in knowing that exact product. but then can also help their core account executives sell that to the end customer. Okay, so we have the sales development representative and the business development representative type roles. So again, sales development representative, business development representative. And a lot of the time, these roles are all around generating pipeline for the account executive. But what's super important to understand is this foundational role is like the front line to representing the organization. And so what is really specific about these roles is that you can't be like spammy or annoying. You have to be very strategic. And especially with the AI slop today, you have to even break through that noise and be more of a human than ever before. However, what you're currently seeing in these job descriptions with these sort of specific roles is also, they're not even advertised as really these entry-level roles anymore, because you're having to learn how to use agents, how to use AI to really be personalized and niche to be able to understand your ICP and book that meeting. Now, the best sales development representatives and the business development representative roles are the ones where they can really understand your account executive's ICP and really work with them as a strategic partner to book meetings for your account executive. Now, typically as an SDR, it's really focused on inbound leads. Now, SDR and BDR can mean almost like the same thing depending on the size of the organization that you're really at. But a BDR is also focused more so on the outbound motion. So typically if you're in a large organization, a lot of these companies will spend lots of money on field marketing events, webinars, and all this sort of stuff. And so leads will come in here, and an SDR is going to go qualify those inbound leads and then be able to book those meetings for a demo or an intro call for the account executive. As a BDR, what is focused here is typically sometimes they get paid a little more than a SDR, and that can be also a promotion from an SDR to a BDR as well. But I fundamentally believe being able to do outbound is so critical, even when you become an account executive. When you're an account executive, you cannot rely just on the SDR to book your meetings for you. And so when you're focusing on outbound leads, you might have, say, 10 to 100 specific accounts you're working with your account executive. And a lot of the times this is like greenfield, and they potentially haven't had any marketing towards them from the company investing paid marketing to them. And so you're doing a lot of the groundhog work to be able to get your company's name out there and strategically understand who you're talking to, the problem of, say, the IT manager or the chief information officer, and why your product, why would they even care about your product, to book a meeting for them. Okay, so these are really targeted as well on like booked meetings. So booked meetings plus pipeline. So we've helped over 100 students now land roles in tech sales, my own experience from working at Splunk and then MoveWorks. This can sometimes be like around 24 meetings per month. It could be 24 meetings per quarter, or it could be like a target number of pipeline generated. But what's most important to know for people coming into the industry, you'll have like a base. So let's say you're in like an 80K to 110K base, and then you might have anywhere from like 30K to 50K of commission on top of that. Now, if you book a meeting, for example, and that booked meeting is qualified and your account executive says that was a great lead that I just spoke to and I can actually see myself having another conversation with that person, is when then you would basically get compensated on that, okay? So basically your role ends once the account executive accepts that meeting being qualified, and then that's when the account executive role really starts from there. Now, again, the best SDR and BDRs are not booking in these random ass meetings to piss off the account executive. They are very high quality leads, and they are constantly doing a great job keeping the end customer or prospected updated with webinars that are happening, and also just news within the industry to keep them and be seen as a bit more of a thought leader. Now, the account executive, how I would think of the account executive, typically these compensation really works as like a 50-50 split. And if you want to earn the most money in tech sales as an individual contributor, as an account executive, is where you're going to make the most money. So account executive. Now, what's important to highlight a part of these roles is that I strongly believe if you can get inside a great organization, don't worry about the title and get on that rocket ship that's going to take off. However, what's important to know is I strongly believe once you become an account executive, no one can take that experience away from you. And if you think about all these different avenues that you can get into in tech, like the account manager or even a customer success manager, all these others like a partner enablement, partner channel manager, all these different roles, is I believe if you can be an account executive for 3 to 5 years and really close some great deals, working your way up from commercial to enterprise to strategic, I strongly believe that's going to go such a long way in your tech sales career that you have consistently closed those deals. Now, typically when you're an account executive, there's like a few different types. So you have commercial, you have mid-market, you have enterprise, and you have strategic. Okay, so all these different, like a commercial account executive, a mid-market account executive, enterprise account executive, and a strategic account executive can all really mean different things depending what size organization you're in. Now, for example, like I'm the CEO of Double Triple, but when it's like, a 5-person size organization, it doesn't mean too much to a company that's doing 100 million revenue, and maybe you're like the enterprise account executive there. So it's always taking the titles, the size of the companies into it to understand really where you are in the ecosystem. And so how I think about as well the organizations and the structure into tech sales, think about you have the customer here. So there's the customer, you have the channel, and then you have the vendor. Okay, so the vendor is like the SaaS company, so software as a service, and they're selling that. Now, I strongly believe to earn the most money, you basically want to work at a vendor. And the reason for that is because obviously you get equity and shares inside those tech companies as well. So if you work for like a public company, you can obviously get shares when you start the organization, and it pretty much vests over a 4-year cycle period. Okay, so what's really good about that is like there's already hard cash. Of course, you want the organization to continuously grow and you believe in the product. But then also you could get equity and shares in like a startup, scale up ecosystem. Okay, so my experience was obviously we were pre-IPO, pre-acquisition. And so when I got shares and stocks with Inside Moveworks, when we got acquired by ServiceNow for $2.85 billion, I got a payout for having those shares vested over that 4-year period as well. And so you want to either get equity or shares, whether it's a public company or a startup scale up, because I strongly believe when you get inside a company that's a startup scale up and you have equity and shares, it's like the funnest, most electrifying company to be a part of because you're all driven by this one mission towards that outcome as well. Now, typically when you think about the different commercial account executives, enterprise account executives, it really is titled based on like the deal sizes that you're closing. Okay, so let's say if I'm like in a Salesforce or a ServiceNow and I'm a strategic account executive, you are probably working with some very, very large customers. Okay, so these deals can really, go from 10 mil plus for the annual recurring revenue. Okay, but if you're like a enterprise account executive, maybe in a bit more of like a startup company that's doing 50 million revenue, maybe those size of those deals are only $1 million a year. So again, it's all really relative, but I strongly believe if you can get into completing the full sales cycle when you're an account executive, going from like intro to demos to discovery to building out the business cases, going through legal, security, and then closing out the deal, I believe those skills is like the closest thing you can possibly think of to becoming an entrepreneur, or really if you ever want to build your business one day, those skills throughout that whole sales cycle is really instrumental to developing your own skills in business as well. So when you think about these different tech sales roles inside these organizations, what does a day actually look like? So I think if I put the lens of the sales development representative or BDRs versus an account executive, very much as an SDR, you're focused on, booking meetings, you'll be doing calls, you'll be messaging people on LinkedIn, everything to do with following people up, understanding the intents of did people come to your website, did they come to a webinar, and you're really building out these sequences to officially book a meeting with them. And what we see again and again in the data, it can be anywhere from 15 to 30 touch points to actually book that meeting. And as an account executive, you are very much heavily focused on when you wake up every single day, and let's say you have 20 different opportunities open in your pipeline, depending again what size organization you're working on. When you look through that pipeline and the opportunities you have live, you really need to understand when you're going to be closing that deal in that quarter, and looking at every single opportunity that you have open, what is one thing you can do today to drive that deal forward? That could be a follow-up email. That could be calling someone. That could be multi-threading with someone in the organization to get a next booked meeting with someone that you haven't actually met before. There's so many different ways that you can continuously drive the opportunity forward. And again, what's super important is to make sure you have the clean pipeline there. And if a deal actually isn't progressing, really working with your manager and your internal teams to understand how you could continuously push that opportunity forward. Now, I think when you jump into tech sales, we've had so many clients, if I think about someone that was a professional nanny already land over 100K role. We've had someone come from medical sales that was earning $200,000 a year to now on a $360,000 package. We had a client, Blake, who just came from real estate, earning $80,000 a year, learning a BDR role on a 170K package out of the gates as well. And time again, we're actually seeing people already double their income just by landing a role from a different industry into tech sales. Now, I think what's important is to understand actually the pay progression, what you could potentially earn within tech sales. So if you think about you are starting here, I think what's important if we understand again the ecosystem. So you have again the vendor here, and then the channel and the customer. I started at a vendor, right? And so I started as a bit more of like that entry-level role as an SDR, whereas Gabe basically cut her teeth in the channel. So Gabe joined the company about 27, 28 years old, and really Gabe was able to build 2 cybersecurity practices from 0 to 100 mil. And so the channel, what's important to understand is really this is the way that vendors, especially if like you're in the APJ region and I'm working for an American-based company or a UK-based company, and vice versa. If I'm in Australia and I'm expanding to America, you need partners and the channel ecosystem of distributions to be able to really expand your software into other customers on ground. And so if you think about the channel, a lot of the times they're doing the implementation of the software and they're very, very close to the end customer. And if you think about like a KPMG or a Deloitte or some sort of large partner in the ecosystem, sometimes they've had these relationships with these S&P 500 companies for decades. And so if you're a new software breaking in and you've just raised 100, 200 million funding or you're bootstrapped, you really need to use the ecosystem and the channel to distribute your software to be able to build those relationships as well. So if you're just starting out as like an SDR, BDR, you really can earn anywhere from, let's say, it can be 80K to really that 170K mark, okay? So I've seen 80K to 170K packages time and time again for really that entry level role, SDR, BDR. But again, I wouldn't really frame it as like an entry level role, because if you've been in like B2C sales before and it's like high velocity, say like real estate sales, and then you come into tech sales, the amount of different tools that you need to learn inside the industry, like these tech companies are using the latest and greatest technology for you to be able to really go and outreach. And I think it's fundamental when you become that account executive. So really from here, once you've done the time in the SDR, BDR role, I would want to be working in here 1 to 2 years. So when you come into the industry, think about the mindset of being in that role for 2 years. If it happens earlier, that's amazing. I was basically in the SDR seat for about 14 months before I got promoted to that commercial account executive role. So once you go to the commercial account executive role, I think it really can be from like that 160K package now to say like a 220K package. And so this is when you first become like your closer and you're actually having to manage the whole life cycle of the deal and closing the opportunities. And so from here, really, again, it's looking like that 50 to 50% base. So you have a base here and then you have comms. And so typically what happens is, let's say you have 500K to close of deals. Let's say you close that $500,000. You would get basically the payout total of the 220K. So let's say you're on a 100K base, you get paid that no matter what, and then basically you get another 100K on comms if I closed $500,000, okay? And what's really exciting about tech sales is typically it's uncapped earnings, and so if you go into accelerators, it's really where you can start to earn like 1.5x, 2x your actual compensation here as well, okay? So I've had many years where I've gone over my quota, and that's really where you make the big bucks as well. So once you go from sort of that commercial AE role, typically again, you go to then mid-market or enterprise and strategic, and really you're just expecting like a bump up on your base and a bump up on your commission as well. So typically, if I think about my experience as well here, so I really went from like 80K, and then I went to 160K, and then I went to, it was like 250, and then it went to 350, and then it went to 450 plus. And then with equity and payouts, I've earned over $500,000 as well. So typically, again, that's like commercial AE to then enterprise, and then I've like just stayed at like that enterprise level role. And I've consistently over exceeded in my quota time and time again as well. So that's really what you can look at as an expected career. I really believe every time you get promoted, you want to be in that sort of role anywhere from a year to 2 years. And when you think about a tech sales company growing rapidly, it's just like you could get potentially promoted faster. But you obviously need to be hitting your quota, being the number one in your team to also be looking to get promoted as well. Now, when you're thinking about picking a tech vendor to work for, first and foremost, before we start thinking about the different tiers of tech companies that you can work for, when you're going through the interview stages, you really want to be asking and understanding these three things. So first of all, it's timing, it's talent, and it's the territory, okay? So you have these three things that you want to think about when you're looking for a tech sales company to work for. Now, first and foremost, what does timing mean? So timing really is understanding, is the tech company, depending how much funding they've had, how many current customers do they have, how much success do they have, where are they opening up in the different regions? And so timing is really understanding if you are starting at that company, is their product ready to sell in that region? And so for example, if you're working for like an American-based company, typically tech companies really start in like North America, grow that out, and then they sort of go in different geographies. However, what we're seeing at the moment is that when a tech company is really starting, they're wanting to go into all different geographies because at the moment, speed can be a moat, which is super important. However, what's important to understand as well when you're selling software, and let's say you're selling software to like a financial services organization, they very much care about security and data. You need to understand even if like they have a specific data center in there that can, if the company buys that software, will it be compliant within that region as well? So really understanding the nitty gritty of like timing and the product is super important. The second one is really territory. Now, what can happen is typically these things you need to ask through the interview process. You are either getting hired for two reasons. The first one is to replace a rep that was already there. And so very important to understand, why did that rep move on? How much did that rep hit quota? And like how many current customers do they have within that territory, and how many upsells can happen as well. So it's super important to understand your territory before getting into the role. Or you could be opening up a whole new region, or you have a whole new green patch, a whole new industry vertical the tech company is going into. And so maybe you are someone that has already been in medical sales or healthcare, and so you come into tech sales and you're selling like a healthcare AI solution. So maybe you can already it's a whole new vertical that they're opening up, but you could bring a whole bunch of your customers and contacts into the company that you could obviously reach out to and try broker intros and close those deals as well. So just super important to understand really the territory, your quota when you start the role, and all those expectations to make sure that you're successful once you start there. And then the third one is talent. And talent really is around your own personal sales skills. So what is super important, I believe, is like you don't need to be the sales wizard before jumping into tech sales. I certainly wasn't. A lot of our folks that we're working with didn't have any sales experience. What is important is that you have like the grit and the willingness to be coached and open-minded to be better every single day. However, the more you can learn the sales skills within B2B enterprise tech sales, you will be a winner. And so what's important to understand is there's B2C and there's B2B sales. And I'm going to break this down here in a moment. However, what's most important is if you can nail all these three things, there is guaranteed that you're going to excel and smash your quota. However, I really believe if you can make sure that you at least tee up these two things before maybe you don't have the exact sales experience, you will get enabled and you'll learn on the job as well. So super important to nail these two things if you don't have the exact sales experience just yet. Now, what's important to highlight between B2C and B2B, sales methodologies is I would say B2C is a lot more like emotional. So think about B2C, much more high velocity. You could be selling just like to one persona. And this can be like real estate sales, like e-commerce, like high ticket sales, all this sort of type of sales. And so what's hard and tricky about this, but there's pros and cons to any sort of sales, is that you typically have to follow like a really strict script. And obviously if you don't sort of close them within sort of like a month or two, you could potentially lose them forever to another customer as well. And same thing with B2B, of course, you can always lose them to competitors. But what is different between B2C and B2B is typically anywhere from like 2 months really to like 12 months plus of a sales cycle. Okay, and so if you're selling like the small subscriptions in SaaS or whatnot. Like let's say they're like $100 subscriptions. This is not really the whole point of this video and what I'm talking about. I'm talking about enterprise B2B sales, which is like 100K plus deals. Okay, so obviously you have like the PLG motions as well. So typically sometimes like you can start and crack into a customer and maybe they're paying like $5,000 a month and then they buy more and more product and then therefore it's like a 100K deal. But really what I'm talking about is the sales cycles that take 100K plus and obviously like $1 million deals. The sales cycles really are typically 2 months to 12 months. I think if it is 2 months, they have a really large pain, they already have budget and they're ready to go. They've already probably had a lot of references with inside the company and everything sort of, is a green tick for them to go ahead. Potentially you had like the economic buyer that was already at a customer before and they've come to a new customer and they've already used your product, and that's why the speed and velocity of closing those deals much quicker. Because of those reasons. Now, typically with a B2B sales cycle, there's frameworks like MedPick and there's many others out there. However, what's super important to understand is like there is really these frameworks that you need to go through to make sure you don't rush the process. Okay, so with B2B sales experience, what we teach a lot of our clients is when you get into a role, you really do need to understand things like the metrics, the economic buyer, the champion, the coach, and all these things that map out to making sure that you get a closed won deal done. Now, when you think about the tech sales companies to go work for, what is super important is to understand is really the different tiers of these tech companies. Now, a lot of folks think about when they jump into tech sales, they probably think of like Microsoft, Google, and Amazon, and they probably don't know really the understanding of the other tech companies that you can get into, okay? Or on the flip side, you have no idea how to evaluate these tech companies, and you have some of our clients that actually jump into tech sales themselves before joining Double Triple, and they actually probably wasted 12 months because what happened over that period, they weren't paying them commission, they went bankrupt, and they weren't actually in a company that had a great product market fit as well. And so how I think about evaluating these companies is that you have these, tier 1 companies, all right? And you think about like, you have ServiceNow, you have Salesforce, you have Google, like all these really large behemoth companies, you would sit them sort of in this bucket here, all right? And then you have the sort of tier 2 to 3 companies, and then you have the tier 4 to 5 companies. Now, a lot of people over their career probably go and work at a larger company, and you could even say this is like OpenAI now, you have Anthropic obviously in here. Now, a lot of the times, I obviously had MoveWorks get acquired by ServiceNow, and so I worked at ServiceNow for the past 8 months. However, I really believe it's like very different in how you learn sales as well, because when you're working with ServiceNow or a Salesforce, they have a very big, strong logo behind them. And so then you think about if we start here, tier 4 and 5, and I think a lot of people land here when they first get into the roles. And so these are companies that probably don't have great VC-backed funding, okay? They're not probably giving out equity or shares. It's like very high risk, okay? It's like super risky to get into these companies, and they probably don't have like a proven system, all right? And I would say they're doing like they're doing less than 10 mil a year at the moment, okay? And these are like, we're in like the 1 billions here for the tier 1s. Now, if you think about tier 2, tier 3, this is really where you want to start your tech sales career. Okay, so sometimes it can take longer to go through the interview process because like you actually have to perform, you have to understand the tech sales product, you have to sell yourself. Why tech sales? Why now? But if you can land a role in this stage of a company, I believe this is where it's really going to accelerate your career. And I believe in 5 to 7 years working in tech sales, if you do everything right, you get out of debt, you start investing the extra resources that you have, you can absolutely change your life. And what's important between myself and Gabe getting into tech sales, we were able to do this and we were able to create financial freedom for ourselves. Within 5 to 7 years, we were already able to have over a $3.5 million property portfolio. We have over 400K in equity and shares. But what was super important, we never inflated our life cycle during this period. So we always saved over 50% of our income, even when we started to earn more money as well. Now, the tier 2 and tier 3 companies, I believe you want to look for these companies that are doing 50 mil in revenue plus is a really good time to join these companies. Okay, so they would also have around 200 people. They have 100 to 300 mil in funding, and you're also going to get equity and shares in this company. And so if you can land a role in this period here, you're either going to get acquired by one of these companies. The CEO or the founders are probably wanting to IPO because they've had funding from VCs. They also want their money back, so they either want to get acquired or IPO to make their money back. But again, it can just be a lot of riskiness joining here. And I strongly believe if you join the tier 2 and tier 3, you're still going to be able to have a lot of control over your lifestyle. You're going to be able to learn a lot around sales experience. Versus also being in sort of tier 1, I believe it's like a big oiled machine operating. And so you don't get as much flexibility to be creative in your own style of sales. So again, if you run this playbook of really getting into an organization of 50 mil plus, has great funding behind you, you can be someone like a Blake that's gone from 80K in real estate to now earning 170K on a package. I was very similar with a company joining here at MoveWorks. And what was really exciting to me when I joined MoveWorks, we had about 400 people already at the organization. We'd already been doing 50 million revenue, but I was going to be the first one in Australia to open up the region, and the experience I was exposed to was extraordinary. But they already had a proven system in America, which meant it was pretty risky for me to open up the APAC region. However, I could really leverage the skills and the talent that they'd already built out in North America. So this is the exact things that I'd be looking for when I'm looking to break into tech sales, what we run our clients through, the mindset that you need to have. But I strongly believe if you go all in on tech sales for 5 to 7 years, you're going to have stability straight out of the gate with a great base. And you're also going to have huge upside with uncapped commission and equity and shares in the organization. But most importantly, you're going to learn some insane skills. And I believe you can either run towards technology or away from it. And if you run towards tech sales, I believe you're using the latest and greatest technology, and you're going to be part of the 1% of the world being in this sector. I'm going to be running a fortnightly webinar where we go much deeper on this and actually walk through exactly how we helped clients go from no sales experience, no degree, no technical background, and also people that are already in tech sales, but also helping them accelerate in their career, helping them hit quota more, get promoted to a senior leader as well. So if you would like to join, there's the link in the description below. And I would love if you drop a comment, because we're going to keep these YouTube episodes running, and I would love to hear from you to make sure I create what you're interested in.